Rear Admiral Peter Brady, Director General of the Maritime Authority of Jamaica and other members of the MAJ, Dr. Hortense Ross Inorarity, Superintendent of Pilotage, Port Authority of Jamaica, and other members of the PAJ, Captain Devon Newman, Dean, Faculty of Shipping and Logistics, Caribbean Maritime University, and other staff and students of the faculty in particular, and the CMU in general, the Shipping Association of Jamaica, panelists, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Thank you for this kind invitation to bring these brief greetings at this webinar, which is hosted by the CMU alongside our partners at the MAJ, PAJ, and SAJ to celebrate International Day of the Seafarer. Our local effort to recognize the importance of this critical group of workers in the maritime and related industries is part of a global celebration under the theme of Fairer Future for Seafarers. This theme places squarely into focus the health, living conditions, and overall well-being of seafarers. This year, more than ever, we must recognize the importance of seafarers as we grapple with a global health crisis brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic. Perhaps more than ever before, seafarers have seen their burdens grow exponentially with COVID-related travel restrictions, preventing the usual movement across our seas and oceans. Even today, many seafarers remain stranded at sea, suffering from fatigue and facing anguish. This is indeed a humanitarian crisis, and we must continue to lend our voices to the cry for a fairer future for seafarers. This is one of the reasons we must use International Day of the Seafarer to honor the world's 2 million seafarers whose dedication and professionalism keep most of the world trade moving safely and delivering vital goods, including food, fuel, as well as medical supplies. We have witnessed firsthand the contribution of seafarers despite the unprecedented and harsh conditions brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic. And even before the pandemic, seafarers often work long periods away from home, away from their friends and families, to keep world trade and global logistics going. This year, more than ever, all stakeholders must play their part to honor our seafarers by recognizing them as key workers. Let me pause to again congratulate all the individuals involved in the planning of this week-long recognition of seafarers. It has done much to raise the public's awareness of seafarers and their contribution to our livelihoods. I must also say a special thanks to our industry partners, the Maritime Authority of Jamaica, the Shipping Association of Jamaica, and the Port Authority of Jamaica for working with the Caribbean Maritime University to lead this initiative. This is the kind of partnership today's function recognizes and celebrates. As the late American author and philanthropist Helen Keller asserted, alone we can do so little. Together we can do a lot. Thank you and best wishes for the rest of these deliberations.
Thank you, Professor. We'll now hear from the Dean of the Faculty of Marine and Nautical Studies at the CMU, Captain Devon Newman. Captain Newman.
On behalf of the Faculty of Marine and Nautical Studies, I bring greetings to all seafarers on this propitious occasion. A seafarer is defined as anyone who is employed to serve in any capacity on board a ship. For more than 5,000 years, seafarers began along major trading routes that extended between modern-day India and Pakistan on the Arabian Sea. Today, there are over 1.6 million seafarers serving on over 50,000 merchant ships operating on rivers, canals, lakes, seas, and oceans to facilitate international trade. The operation of ships has transitioned from the use of wooden vessels fitted with sails to modern-day steel-hulled vessels propelled by steam, diesel fuel, liquefied natural gas, or battery electric engines, coupled with advanced navigation, cargo handling, and marine engineering technologies. Although these changes are welcomed by the industry, seafarers are yet to receive the attention that they truly deserve. Alas, August 2013 saw the coming into force of the Maritime Labor Convention of 2006, which has been dubbed the Seafarers Bill of Rights. Today, seafarers have the right to leave, repatriation, safe working environment, onboard recreation, food, and catering. While the industry has implemented several changes that seek to improve the training, employment, and working conditions of seafarers, they continue to face many challenges, such as mental depression, loneliness, poor working conditions, abandonment, and fatigue. In June 2010, the IMO hosted a conference in Manila, Philippines, to review the international convention that governs standards for the training of seafarers, where a resolution was adopted to establish a Day of the Seafarer. On June 25, 2011, the first Day of the Seafarer was celebrated, and today, as we celebrate its 10th anniversary, we join the rest of the world in showing our appreciation to all seafarers for their invaluable contribution to the global economy and to assure them that they must remain resolute while a fair future awaits them on the horizon. Thank you.
Thank you, Captain Newman. So we're going to jump into the panel discussion in a moment, but before we do, let's set the context of the discussion with this message from the Secretary General of the International Maritime Organization, that's the IMO.
Seafarers have always been at the heart of the world trade. Their work touches the lives of each and every one of us, whether it is the food on our tables, the medicine that keep us healthy, the computers we are using for work and leisure, or the vehicles that transport us in our daily lives. All these items are primarily transported by sea. The ongoing COVID-19 pandemic created challenging working conditions, including difficulties with the port access, repatriation, crew changes, and more. Unfortunately, there are still too many seafarers that have not been able to leave ships for an extended period beyond their contract, and others have been unable to join ships in order to earn a living. Despite these difficulties, seafarers have gone beyond the call of duty, working tirelessly to keep global trade flowing. IMO and our partners are doing our part to support seafarers and make sure that they are given the rights and protections of key workers. This includes priority vaccination and ease of travel. Last year, on the Day of the Seafarers, the IMO asked the world to recognize seafarers are key workers. Many countries have answered that call. However, the crew change crisis is far from being resolved. We all must keep seafarers in our hearts and continue to take action that will return seafaring to normal practices for crew changes. So this year, we are calling for a fair future for seafarers. Our 2021 Day of the Seafarers campaign builds on the progress we have made to support seafarers on pandemic-related challenges. It aims to draw global attention to other areas where fairness is important. This includes a safe and a secure environment on ships, reasonable working conditions, fair treatment in all situations, as well as respect for the rights of all, regardless race, gender, and religion. I'm especially pleased that IMO will be amplifying the voices of seafarers themselves as they discuss what a fairer future would look like to them under the hashtag Fair Future for Seafarers. Seafarers, we are listening, and we will make sure you are heard. If you are seafarers, I encourage you to participate in this discussion and share your vision for a fair future. And if you are a part of the maritime industry or beneficiary of the services of seafarers, I ask you to listen to their words, show your appreciation, and take action to create a better world for seafarers who do so much for all of us.
So it's time to meet our panelists. Let's begin with Rear Admiral Peter Brady. Rear Admiral Brady has over 3 decades of military experience, having served at the highest capacity as Chief of Staff of the Jamaica Defense Force. He was awarded a postgraduate degree in Maritime Management from Dalhousie University in Canada, and has received several accolades, including the Commander of the Royal Victorian Order, the Commander of the Order of Distinction, and the Legion of Merit. Rear Admiral Brady has served as guest lecturer in Maritime Safety Administration and Maritime Security at the World Maritime University, Dalhousie University in Canada, and was recently appointed to the Board of Governors of the World Maritime University. In 2006, Admiral Brady was appointed chairman of the National Hydrographic Committee and honorary consul of the Principality of Monaco. He currently holds the position of Director General of the Maritime Authority of Jamaica, and he's chairman of the United Nations Specialized Agencies International Maritime Organization's body for global standards of training and certification for merchant marine officers, including masters and chief engineers. Captain Devon Newman. Captain Newman's career spans over 3 decades at the Caribbean Maritime University, where he's currently Dean of the Faculty of Marine and Nautical Studies. Captain Newman is a graduate of the CMU, the very first batch of what was then the Jamaica Maritime Training Institute, JMTI, in 1980, set up as part of an agreement between the governments of Jamaica and Norway on September 15, 1980, at Norman Road in Kingston. A 2-time graduate of the Caribbean Maritime University, CMU, in the areas of nautical studies and international shipping and logistics, our next panelist is Dr. Hortense Ross Inararity, and she also has over 3 decades of experience in the shipping industry and is also the first female superintendent of pilotage at the Port Authority of Jamaica, PHA. She is also lectured at the CMU in the areas of commercial shipping, economics of shipping, international trade and finance, and maritime security, and continues to be a leading industry practitioner in the maritime transportation and port services. And last but not least is Second Officer Garfield Allen, who hails from the southern parish of Clarendon, Jamaica. He completed his secondary education at Denby High School and then matriculated to the then Caribbean Maritime Institute, from where he graduated with distinction in nautical science. Second Officer Allen embarked on his first voyage as a cadet in 2013 with Harron and partner. He joined the Exmar Ship Management team in 2015, and since then, it's been smooth sailing for the seafarer as he continues to excel in the industry. He's greatly respected by his colleagues of all ranks and aspires to continue to rise at the top. So today we're talking about partnership and collaboration in the development of the seafarer and the future of the maritime industry. So I want to get some initial comments from each of our panelists, beginning with Rear Admiral Brady, just to ask you what partnership and collaboration looks like to you from the perspective of policy and governance. Rear Admiral Brady.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. First of all, I must thank the organizers of this splendid event for putting on this panel discussion on today, which is such an important day for seafarers, and to also doubly congratulate on the theme that you have chosen for Fair Future for Seafarers. The theme for today's panel discussion, partnerships and collaboration. I think we also must congratulate the International Maritime Organization, who 11 years ago in the Philippines, in Manila, Philippines, when they were doing the amendment to the STCW convention, a resolution was passed to declare this day, June 25, as the Day of the Seafarer. And coincidentally, we are celebrating 10 years since that resolution was passed. So IMO also deserves a lot of credit for this recognition. And it's a pity that we have to set aside a single day of the year to recognize these professionals, because every day they are at sea, they trod and they plod and they work hard. They work many, many hours beyond their normal time in order for us to be comfortable ashore. And we only recognize them one day of the year in this manner. We need to, I think, double up our efforts in that regard. Seafarers, I am a seafarer, but I'm also happy to be a maritime policymaker serving our country, Jamaica. And it's a pleasure to be participating in this event today. You know, the pandemic has brought to the fore some of the serious deficiencies that our seafarers suffer at sea. And I hope that in our discussions this morning, we'll be able to explore some of those areas, not only to have a talk shop, to see how we can, in fact, through this very partnership and collaboration among ourselves here in Jamaica, at the Maritime University, at the Shipping Association of Jamaica, among the seafarers at the Maritime Authority of Jamaica, maybe we can come up with something to alleviate the problems that our seafarers are undergoing at sea, and to further recognize them for their splendid efforts throughout the year. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Rear Admiral Brady. Let's get some opening comments as well from Captain Newman. Captain Newman. Captain Newman. All right, just having a little bit of technical difficulty. I don't think Captain Newman is hearing us. So let's move on to our third panelist, Dr.
I'm on, Archibald. I'm on.
Okay, go ahead, please. Your
So
opening
what
comments.
I want to share is that based on some research that I've been doing in preparation for this panel discussion, I came across a document that was just recently published by the International Chamber of Shipping, which I took an extract from it, which speaks to the fact that the industry and relevant stakeholders should not expect an abundant supply of qualified and competent seafarers without concerted efforts and measures to address key manpower issues through promotion of careers at sea, enhancement of maritime education and training worldwide, and addressing the retention of seafarers. And what I want to focus on is, while we have the mandatory requirements, which are minimum standards outlined in the STCW Convention, the maritime education and training institutions are faced with the challenge of providing the right resources as outlined by the IMO in terms of bridge and engine room simulators, in terms of machine shops with lathes, drill presses, milling machines, and various welding plants, marine diesel engines, pumps, marine boilers, generators, electrical, electronics, and control engineering laboratories. And as I speak, one can understand that that would attract a significant cost. Now, most of our METs in developing countries cannot afford that. So we want to talk about how partnerships will be able to assist these developing countries, these institutions in these countries, to be better able to provide for the kind of training that is required for these officers to operate on these vastly advanced technology-driven vessels. And also, what about the trainees? They're having a challenge also in terms of funding their education. How can we make this possible? Of course, a lot of our trainees are unable to fund their education. They also have challenges taking advantage of student loan and qualifying for scholarships that are available. So we want a better, more intervention a more active involvement from government by way of subsidies and to reduce the cost of training if we're going to provide the suitable numbers that are required to man these ships. We are faced with upward trending a shortage of seafarers globally, and this is going to be fueled by the impacts of COVID-19, because training is going to be reduced in terms of numbers, and so the industry is going to face an uphill challenge where that is concerned. Well, also, I'll talk a little bit about partnering with shipping companies that are actually training our cadets. How can we partner with them in order to facilitate, to offset some of the expenses that we face? We want to also ensure that we engage our alumni. I don't think that we have done enough in that area to take advantage of their expertise, their knowledge that they've gained in the industry, and how they can come back and partner with us to share. So we want to have the partnership and collaborations to make the venture a successful one. Thank you.
Thank you, Captain Newman. Over to our opening remarks from our third panelist, Dr. Ross Inararte. Dr. Inararte, I think you're muted.
Good morning to everyone. Let me first thank the Caribbean Maritime University for hosting this panel discussion. I'm very delighted to join my colleagues and look forward to a very interactive session. As a former seafarer myself, I crave your indulgence to allow me to start my presentation there. Between 1985 and 1990, I was fully committed to acquiring new knowledge in the classroom and on board ships. The ships I served on, first as an officer trainee and later as an officer, were crewed with individuals from different countries, having different cultures and speaking different languages. Despite the diverse, close working environment, each crew member was required to perform their assigned tasks safely and with the highest standard of efficiency. But how do you accomplish that when getting the job done required effective communication, tolerance, inclusion, and sharing of knowledge and technical know-how? The increased stress brought on by the expectation The increased stress brought on by the expectation of getting it right the first time can sometimes be detrimental to the seafarer's health and well-being.
Dr. Inararte, I think you're muted.
Oh, I don't know what is happening there. Can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, I don't know what is happening there, right? But how can you accomplish the high standard of efficiency when getting the job done required effective communication, tolerance, inclusion, and sharing of knowledge and technical know-how? The increased stress brought on by the expectation of getting it right the first time can sometimes be detrimental to the seafarer's health and well-being. If he or she is not mentally, physically, and emotionally prepared to function in such high-stress, high-risk working environment. This scenario would be considered normal prior to March 2020. Since March 2020, however, Jamaica and the rest of the world have been experiencing a new way of living and coping with the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, which we're still experiencing today. The pandemic has brought into sharp focus the critical role seafarers play to ensure that we continue to conduct business across borders and keep the local and global economy afloat, notwithstanding the increased stress and fatigue, mental health challenges, and isolation brought on by the restriction associated with the COVID-19 country protocols. Whilst no sale order was issued for the cruise ship industry, countries were encouraged to keep their borders open to merchant shipping to facilitate international trade in cargo, such as raw materials for manufacturing, medicine, food, clothing, building materials for housing and commercial structures, furniture, semi-finished and finished products, motor vehicles, spare parts, and equipment. These commodities were received on board, stored, and delivered at a port in a foreign country by seafarers. It is worth noting that over 90% of commodities traded are transported by sea. This means that the success of international trade is underpinned by the sacrifice and contribution of seafarers globally. Why then should they be denied essential worker status? Why then should they be denied the support they need to discharge their duties safely and effectively, while at the same time enjoying an acceptable standard of health and well-being? How could we for so long ignore the invaluable contribution of seafarers to our own lives and livelihood? Today, as we celebrate International Seafarers Day, let us continue the conversation through collaboration between governments and the global shipping community to effect meaningful change for seafarers who will be required to navigate the increased complexities associated with cargo, ship, and port operations. To the seafarers, I say, you are the propeller that keeps the ship known to us as global trade sailing. On behalf of the allied industry, port authorities, harbor authorities, port and terminal operators, freight forwarders, stevedoring companies, ship agents, marine surveyors, and other marine service providers, I salute all seafarers and say thank you for being our unsung heroes. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ross Inararity. And let's close our opening comments by hearing from Second Officer Garfield Allen. Stalin.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon. Pleasant morning, my fellow panelists. Let me first take the time out to thank Captain Newman, as he was the one that reached out to me and invited me to be a part of this panel. It is an honor to be a part of this discussion today. And I'm here to speak about Seafarers Perspective. So as an active seafarer, you would have heard the stat already from the welcoming remarks and even from Dr. Inararity, that 90% of goods and services across the globe are transported by sea. A few months back, we had an accident, let's say, or a collision, or rather it was a grounding, sorry, by the Evergreen. It's almost a week. I think we're all aware of it. And it costs billions. So that's how important it is for us, the demand to bring the goods in a timely manner, safely and efficiently. You miss one day and you lose billions. So as Dr. Inararity said, you have to get the job done from day one. Now, as it relates to the partnership and collaboration, it is very important because from my story, when I was at CMU or CMI as a cadet, it was a challenging time financially. Financially in the sense where the final year, you would have to find the tuition, boarding, etc. And not many persons could get through with student loan because we all know the challenges that is faced by that. So with partnership and collaboration from government agencies, shipping companies, more scholarships can be given for the students, more grants can be given. And through this, we can increase the maritime labor. As Captain Newman said, that the demand for seafarers is high. We have less seafarers. So, and now even with the pandemic, which has affected us severely. Myself, when the pandemic hit, I was home for 9 months due to the fact that I couldn't travel. We're all aware of the travel ban from countries. So I myself was stuck at home. And when I finally got to go to sea, I lost my dad and I was unable to come back home. So it just shows the problem or the severe risk that our job entails. Uh, I know persons that were stuck for a year at sea, and I know persons that were stuck at home at sea. So I believe that when authorities or institutions are negotiating contracts for, let's say, seafarers, for the future seafarers, I believe that something can be put in place for pandemic and things like this, because for a person that is stuck at home for a year, they are without salary and they have family, they have needs, they have wants, and they have a life and all. So I believe that all of this in the negotiation process, in the beginning, for example, let's use CMU. If we should get a new company and we're negotiating, we can negotiate life after sea, life at home. Seafarers on a whole, we are challenged with mental problems in terms of being away from family. Yes, we are all aware of the career at large. Yes, we'll go to sea, we'll be away from family. But there are other challenges that are faced out there, and there is nothing in place, you know, to contact someone, to speak to someone, to clear certain things in life that, you know, can be life-threatening. The university and industry collaboration is very critical and important for the achievement of sustainable growth and industry. Improving the maritime industry long-term sustainability requires partnership at the national and international level. So building and maintaining strong, reliable relationships with public and private stakeholders is critical to reinforce the industry and to continue the development of seafarers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Allen. All right, so I'm hearing a couple of different themes right there in terms of areas of focus. I am hearing, first of all, this issue of the challenges facing seafarers, especially in the context of COVID-19, and specifically in the context of COVID-19. I'm hearing about the issues in relation to the training of seafarers, Captain Newman raising several issues here. Trainees needing assistance with funding, more active involvement from the government, engaging alumni as well. And I'm hearing a third thread, at least a third major thread, about the health and wellness of seafarers overall. And I want to take the discussion there in looking for the next sections rather, in those three sessions. First, looking at this question of the challenges facing seafarers and what needs to be done at the policy level. And from that perspective, then I want to start with Rear Admiral Peter Brady, because on December 1, 2020, the United Nations General Assembly unanimously adopted a resolution on international cooperation to address some of the challenges faced by seafarers as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic to support global supply chains. And I wanted to ask Rear Admiral Brady, what, first of all, is the aim here and what is Jamaica doing? And then third, what should Jamaica be doing? So first question is, what's the aim of that resolution?
Thank you very much, Archibald, and thank our fellow panelists for their opening remarks. They're helping to set the theme for today. I want to take you back before the UN resolution of December to about April of last year, when the UN specialized agency with responsibility for safety of ships, pollution prevention, and so on, the International Maritime Organization, made an appeal to member states to declare seafarers as key workers, is the term they used. And that was a very, very important policy platform in which they placed the entire industry and asked the member states, which, as you know, number about 174, to take on the responsibility of recognizing the special plight of the seafarers against this COVID-19 background, and to understand the critical importance of having the global supply chain with trade continue uninterrupted, because there were very, very early signs of problems with seafarers doing crew changes, doing repatriations, simply going ashore from the ships when they went into ports, and therefore asked that a special attention be given to them in some form of official recognition. And so this plea went out, and for a few months, it kind of fell on deaf ears until they emphasized the importance, and we're seeing the amount of seafarers that were troubled and were prevented from doing their crew changes and so on. Some of the crews, as were mentioned before, and I think Garfield mentioned it, that he, for instance, was ashore for 9 months. There were some seafarers who were serving their contracts on board ships for 7, 8, 9, 10 months and could not repatriate. And this is a critical aspect of a seafarer's life, because they have to be refreshed, they have to be rested, they have to be fit for purpose at sea, because if they're not fit, then they're going to endanger the safety of the ship. And so a number of countries did in fact enact some sort of legislation or some guidance on how to deal with this matter. As it stands, though, up to December, coming back down to December of last year, only about 55 of the 174 member states of the IMO had actually recognized the need for embracing this particular requirement that the seafarers be designated as key workers. In our case, Jamaica was very, very quick off the ball with this, and the Maritime Authority of Jamaica recommended to government to designate our seafarers, or all seafarers who will interact with us, come to our ports, as essential workers. Because already the term essential was used in our legislation, to wit, the Disaster Risk Management Act, we got the government to agree to designating seafarers as essential workers. And that put us among the top IMO nations that therefore afforded the easy movement of seafarers through our corridors. So that was one of the key accomplishments of Jamaica last year. And in conjunction with the Ministry of Health and with the shipping industry in Jamaica, we were able to provide for the application and processing of seafarers by virtue of this piece of legislation through, if you want to call it, a green line at our ports, whereby on a successful application, they would come to our ports for the crew transfers and pass through the corridor in an expedited way and move on to their respective designations. Now, that was a very key thing. Regrettably, though, Mr. Moderator, while in September or so of last year, there were some 400,000 seafarers who were experiencing this particular problem. With the efforts of some of the member states like ourselves, that number came down to about 200,000 in December, which showed that it can work. And now, up until May this year, we still have that number. However, as you very well know, there has been a spike in some countries. One of the countries in which that spike is in India. India is a major seafarer producing nation. And so there is now, as we speak, somewhat of a fear that those numbers could again go up to 400,000 seafarers who are, for the want of a better word, abandoned, so to speak, wherever they are and not able to do the necessary crew changes. So that, we believe, is a very important policy decision that member states have to take to recognize the seafarers for that. Now, the other aspect, of course, is the vaccination. But I am sure that you will be looking at this in a separate way. But the vaccination, if it's not afforded to seafarers, it's going to create another serious problem. Because if we are going to have uninterrupted trade, which is so important for our lives and our livelihoods, then we have to recognize these invisible people, the seafarers. Invisible because they really operate below the radar. We're not seeing them. The aviation industry, for instance, we see when a plane passes over and we know that people are operating them, but we're not seeing the ships when they come in at 2 o'clock in the morning to our ports and clear port again by 7 o'clock in the morning. We are not seeing them, and that recognition is critical. But you know what too? And you know about it in your profession. If you don't talk about your profession, then the general public can't know. So there is a serious deficiency in maritime PR, and we have to try to fix that too. We can fix that in Jamaica with people like yourself, Shipping Association of Jamaica, the Port Authority of Jamaica, by putting on programs like this to bring the industry to the general public, to make them again understand and know how important it is for us. And I want to stop there for the time being, Mr. Moderator.
How do I want to stick with this point for a second? Do we do this on a regional level, and how successful has this effort been? Because you say 55 out of 174. That's less than a third. That's less than 1 in 3. How have other Caribbean states reacted to this? Have they done similarly? And what sort of efforts do we need to make in Jamaica, or take in Jamaica, to encourage our colleagues in CARICOM and in the region overall to do similarly?
Okay, let me update that figure. It's now gone up to about 64 countries since May of this year. So it's still dismally low. We need a more take up from the member states. Now, how can we now communicate effectively to our regional partners that they also need to step up on board with this kind of gesture? There is a mechanism which we call the MOU on port state control, the Caribbean MOU on port state control, in which all our member states in the region are members. And there is a constant interchange of information between us. We can use that as a medium because we do not know which other countries in the Caribbean have actually designated apart from the Bahamas, have designated seafarers as key workers. So we are very much behind as a region. We also have an annual event called the Senior Maritime Administrators Conference, which the IMO sponsors for us. That's coming up towards the ending of July. And we're going to use that platform in order to impress upon our sister countries in the Caribbean the critical importance of giving the recognition to the seafarers that they deserve, so that the Caribbean as a region can be seen as being complying with all of the rules and standards, but also having the conscience that we need to ensure our seafarers are facilitated in their work.
Now, a key part of this is going to be this question of what we do where vaccinations are concerned. And I want to bring in Dr. Ross Inararity here, because you raised this issue of the essential worker status as well. In terms of members of the sector, you're a member of the sector as well. You straddle multiple sectors. Two that I spoke about in my introduction today, Dr. Ross Inararity, this question of teaching, as well as this question of overall the Port Authority of Jamaica. What are the kind of steps you would like to see from a regional perspective in terms of this question of how vaccinations are dealt with? This is a key discussion point around the world. What steps need to be taken at a regional level specifically in relation to vaccination?
Okay, thank you very much. I think the first thing is that we need to recognize the connection between the port, the ship, and the cargo. And once we do that, because irrespective of where the vessel calls, the common thread to all of that is the seafarer. So there need to be a global, regional and global push to have a special arrangement in place to ensure that seafarers are vaccinated. We know it's only the J&J that has a single dose, but there has to be some collaboration nonetheless, because ships will be on sea at all times, heading to a particular port in a country. So how do we ensure that even on boarding, they get one shot of the vaccine, that then when they arrive at another port, it's available to them to ensure full vaccination? So the collaboration that we talk about, it's with all stakeholders, recognizing the important link between the ship, the port, and the cargo. Everything else revolves around that. And so I think it has to be a collaborative effort and a shared resources to ensure that irrespective of the port of call, there is support for the seafarer there to facilitate that process.
Second Officer Allen, I want to bring you in here. And by the way, if you have questions or comments, you can share them in the chat. I'll share them with members of our panel. I will take questions as well and share them. You can raise your hand if there's a point that you want to raise. I want to bring you in here specifically because, as I think members of the panel have emphasized overall, and I think Rear Admiral Brady did so eloquently just a moment ago, everyone sees when a plane is taking off and is landing, but no one sees when a ship is coming in the middle of the night. No one knows what's being done there. So no one has been hearing the perspective of the officers and the seafarers on this issue of vaccination. First of all, are you open to it? And what would you like to see? Do you feel as if your health, specifically on the question of vaccination, has been taken has been taken care of, that anyone's thinking about you?
Yes, Mr. Gordon, I'm definitely open to it. What I can say, my company, Exmar, right? They have formed a collaboration with Johnson & Johnson. So currently, as we speak, once any other ship, once they go to US, yeah, it's only in US. So once a ship berths in US, each crew member, they have a choice to be vaccinated, but that's only done in US. So the point that Dr. Inerti made is that apart from the Johnson & Johnson, there are other ships that are stuck, well, not stuck. They're traded only in the North Sea or in India, for example, right? And if they get one shot of another vaccine, there is nothing in place that they'll get the same shot somewhere else. So this is why Exmar, they partnered with the Johnson & Johnson. But the problem is it's only witnessed in the US. So that's the only problem. So I can say my company, they have taken some steps to ensure that the seafarers, they are vaccinated. But I believe that the vaccination should start from the country, from each seafarer's country. If we are deemed frontline workers or essential workers, we would be a part of the vaccination program. So that's where I think it should start. Because as you know, for example, I'm scheduled to leave on Sunday and I'm going to join a ship in China. So to reach to China, I'm going to go through I'm going to transit through different countries and I'm still not vaccinated. So you can see where the problem lies. So I think that if each crew member or if seafarers on a whole are deemed essential workers, frontline workers, then we can be vaccinated from our country, and then from the health perspective, it would be better. So that's my point right there.
I want to bring, thank you. I want to bring in, I'm seeing one comment here in the chat that says the concern is about the specific vaccine Jamaicans are getting, which is expired or close to be expired. I want to bring in Rear Admiral Brady here just to close the point specifically in relation to vaccination. Just to ask, what are the steps that we should take locally? We've taken the first step in terms of designating seafarers as essential workers under the Disaster Risk Management Act, the DRMA. But what are the steps that we can take, especially in context of the fact that there are challenges with vaccines now?
And you've underscored it by using the word challenges, because we all know what has been happening in Jamaica. Certainly in the last 2 or 3 days, we have seen the anomalous situation that has occurred. So Jamaica in itself, because we are not a producer of vaccines and rely on vaccines coming from overseas, it's very, very difficult. And when you pitch this against the general needs of the population, it's a very, very difficult question to address. However, if these people are designated as key workers, as essential workers, therefore they are categorized for receiving on a priority basis vaccinations. And it is our firm belief that seafarers, certified seafarers, should also be in the same line as other people now who have been grouped for vaccinations imminently. This is how we feel about that one. But you have to put it against the needs of the country and the sensational news that have been surrounding the vaccinations in Jamaica. So that's a difficult one for me to answer, and I would ask other people to join in on that. However, I want to come back to just the type of vaccination that the seafarer should use. We should go for the one-shot vaccination, because although ships like Exmar ship, for instance, are in a line of trade, so to speak, and their schedules are fairly predictable when they will get into the next port, there are so many irregularities, so many anomalies at sea that a seafarer can't be guaranteed a date for the second shot, so to speak. And so it is, I believe, most desirable that the one-shot vaccination be given to seafarers because of this unpredictability of schedules.
A lot of rich issues here, but I have to move on to the second issue, and we have a third to get to. So a lot of issues. Let's move on to the second issue, which is this issue of training, especially in the context of the challenges that we're facing because of COVID-19. And I want to start with Captain Newman here, because Captain Newman, you raised this issue of the kind of assistance that is needed to ensure that you get the kind of you get the human resources which are necessary in the context of A, the importance of seafaring, and B, simply the context of the fact that the world is short of seafarers overall. You listed a couple of initial steps there that need to be taken to assist with education and training. What for you is the priority? What for you is the priority? That's my question to you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gordon. The priority, of course, would be two-pronged. One, we need to ensure that we have the resources in place, and that spans the right human resources and all the equipment and the facilities, simulators, and so on. And then, of course, we need to ensure that we are able to attract the people, the trainees, the right trainees, and they should be able to afford that. Now, in terms of the education, now, as we know, it is quite costly globally. When I started my training, the governments of Jamaica and Norway signed a partnership. So we're coming back to that stage, we're talking about partnerships. There's no cost for that education to any of us for 10 years. We didn't have to pay anything to get this training because there was an agreement in place in order. That's the only way it could have happened. We could not have afforded that training because it is so expensive. The inputs to make it possible is so costly. I mean, you're talking about a simulator, bridge simulator that will cost $800,000 US, for example, and it depends on the capabilities of it. It could cost more, but it is expensive. So how do we be able to find that money to provide that and to take in students and not charge them? So it has to be some kind of partnership in order to make this possible. So the resources need to be available to deliver the training according to the standards that are required. And then, of course, the trainees must be able to afford. We must be able to create the opportunity for them to attend to the training and to complete the training. In that equation, therefore, we have a challenge. If we're faced with a challenge, it's quite a serious problem. If we are faced with a shortage of seafarers as we speak, and 5 years down the road as a result of COVID-19, that is going to, the projection is that it is going to get worse. So what are we doing? We need to fix the problem of ensuring that we make the training available. It must be affordable or available to people. Otherwise, we're going to have a problem. The industry has to take some steps to fix this. The governments have to get involved. The youngsters who would like to go to sea, they are caught between a rock and a hard place. What are they to do? We heard about even accessing student loan from Second Officer Allen. It's available, but sometimes they don't qualify. So there is a real challenge. So the priority would be the provision of the right resources and also the proper marketing to attract the youngsters to get involved in the training.
Where the provision of resources is concerned, though, Second Officer Allen was talking about scholarships, and you've been talking about assistance, but now you've gone a little further to talking about this question of whether, given the importance of the maritime and related sectors and global trade overall and what it means to the world, whether that training should not be free, given what you're talking about. Let me bring in Dr. Ross Inararte at this point right here, because you straddle both sectors. Is that an idea you think, Dr. Ross Inararte, that members of the sector would support? This idea of providing the funding that would ensure that pumping more money into the sector to provide a certain level of funding that would perhaps make more opportunities available to people, including free being the key word here.
Sure. I think, again, it goes to the issue of collaboration and partnership. There's the interconnectedness in the industry. There's no one component that you can isolate. And it is why the recognition of that important role that seafarers are playing to everybody's life, that we need to focus on more collaboration and more partnership to facilitate training. What is happening now with COVID and technology is that we need to not only train new recruits, but we also need to retrain and uptrain those who are existing to make their transition and adjustment to the smart ports that they're having now, to the smart ships that they're designing and building now. So we have to look at it in a holistic way. And the only way to arrive at that position is through collaboration and partnership to reduce the cost of training. I think shipping companies also have a big role to play because they're the ones who are recruiting. One drawback for me as well is not enough focus has been placed on human resource management for shipboard personnel. And that's an area I think we need to focus on. And the issue of diversity on board. You have a ship crew with several different nationalities and you're new on board and you're expected to fit in and start working right away, irrespective of your fundamental training that you get. How do you assimilate in that environment and deliver at the required level? So it takes everybody to cooperate to make it work. And the more we can reduce that cost, then the bigger pool we have in terms of making seafarers available to man the ships.
So let's talk about that, making that, getting that bigger pool available, and go back to Rear Admiral Brady here just for a second. And that question, what can we do from a collaborative perspective? What should we be asking for? Should be asking for more funding specifically for maritime related for people who are taking part in that field? What should we be asking for? What's realistic?
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, I think we must also look at the bigger picture. Caribbean Maritime University does get a subvention, a substantial subvention from government on an annual basis. Not to say that it is now at a level of development where we should be asking for a higher level. I believe now that we need a higher level of subvention in order just to maintain the programs that are in place now. However, there's also a facility called the Students' Loan Bureau, which I think maybe it can be more generous to the maritime side. And that is something, again, that we'd have to do at the very highest level to demonstrate the absolute need for an increase in student loan, bursaries, whatever, for assisting our seafarers to get the right kind of training that they need at the Caribbean Maritime University. And guess what? The quality of our seafarers is so high, demonstrated, for instance, with the very same company that features here today, Exmar, which Garfield is now working for. They can't get enough Jamaican seafarers. Why? Because they are well-trained, they're disciplined, they're focused, and they're loyal. Now, these are 4 qualities that we need at sea. Now, maybe we need to look out from Jamaica to some of these other companies to assist some more with some scholarships, because we just aren't getting enough, as we can see here. But there is no quick solution to this. However, we must recognize that government of Jamaica does provide the facility for assisting our students with scholarships. I want to touch on a quick point that Dr. Hortense Ross Inararity mentioned about diversity on board. When she said diversity, my mind right away went to a different dimension. And I thought she meant that we should also consider the very critical importance of women in maritime. But maybe you will come back at another time with that one if we're
No,
allowed.
you went on that point. That's what I thought about when she said it as well.
Look here, folks. Let me tell you
Giving
something.
her history-making role in the industry.
Jamaica has been producing some incredible women in the maritime industry, both ashore and at sea. I mean, this lady, Dr. Hortense Ross, for instance, is great evidence of it. And they make excellent seafarers. We need now to emphasize that program some more for women in maritime affairs. And, you know, it's part of the UN Sustainable Development Goal, item 5, equality for women. And we need to pay some more attention to that one. But with regards to the funding that we need for our students, we have to, I think, probably have a seminar and look at how we can improve and increase the kind of funding that we need to sustain our students at the university. Thank you, Chair.
Let's touch on that point about diversity quickly. I just want to get 2 comments. First from Captain Newman, and I'm going to ask Dr. Ross Inararity to close that part of the discussion as we move to this question of mental health. First, you, Captain Newman, on this question of funding and diversity, and then I will ask Dr. Ross Inararity to close this segment of the discussion.
In terms of funding, are you referring to possible solutions? And
yes, possible solutions.
Yeah. Okay, well, Rear Admiral Peter Brady mentioned the subvention from government, and I am aware of the subvention. Where it goes, I think it filters right through the institution. But I think our focus has to be specific as it relates to maritime education and training. That is the flagship faculty of the university. It has its own significance, it stands out, and we have heard all the compliments being lauded where that is concerned. What I see from, I don't want to compare developed countries with developing countries, but in Denmark, for example, Maersk, in order to attract youngsters to get into seafaring, because they face the same problem, the European youngsters, they don't want to go to sea anymore because they can earn enough with a shore-based job. So they don't need to go to sea. So in order to attract them to go to sea, Maersk, for example, sponsors their entire education. They pay for everything. They guarantee placement for them on board. Well, Maersk is a very large shipping company. And so everything is guaranteed. No, that's a quick fix solution for those youngsters. What we have to do here, and what I'm hearing is, we need to go back to making some kind of agreement, some kind of partnership and collaboration with also the shipping companies. They stand to benefit also if they invest in training youngsters who will eventually come back and work for them. So it's not just, we should just be standing alone and say, well, we have no sponsorship. The shipping companies have to rely also on seafarers, because seafarers have to operate the ships. So
they're the backbone of the industry.
Right, and they stand to benefit also. So as Admiral Peter Brady has said, we need to sit at a table. I don't want to talk so much about it, but we need to act, because the problem is getting worse. Right now, we're seeing a reduction in enrollment in our seafarer programs for assortment of reasons. But this is also, if we take just our situation and multiply that by 15 other countries, we can see that it's going to impact the industry later. So it's alarming. If you know the facts and the statistics, you'll realize that we are trending in a very, very negative direction.
And one of the key things while we talk about expanding training has to be about how we expand training and diversify who gets training.
Right. Well, in terms of the diversification, that is Dr. Ross Inararity alluded to that. Of course, the training in terms of keeping pace with what's happening, and the technology is also running away from the conventions, because the conventions are not able to. I attended a conference out of Gdynia last week, out of Poland, and that was one of the key comments that was made by one of the discussants in terms of the convention cannot change as quickly as the technology, because the ship owners, they are interested in moving with the technology to remove the human element as much as possible. So while they're running away with that, the convention, the changes to the convention, it takes time. They have to meet, they have to discuss, and they can't just keep changing the convention overnight all the time. So the industry itself is also, in terms of the convention for training, is behind the technology. The technology is way out front. And what Dr. Inarity is indicating, therefore, is that what we need to do is to ensure that the training that the cadets are getting now, at best, is in line with what they're going to expect out at sea. And that is going to cost a lot for us to afford all of that information and technology training for them. And what about the seafarers that completed their studies 10 years ago? Well, they would have been working with the technology. So what we have to do also is to be able to benefit from their experience, to let them come back and share their knowledge also. So that is something that I'm talking about in terms of partnerships for alumni to be able to come back and contribute and to share and help us to make the situation better.
Especially in the context of the fact that, especially, you know, this is a new era in many ways, and it's a new era that continues to expand. I want to point out to the folks who are making comments in the chat that we are seeing those comments. A lot of these comments relate to this question of mental health, which is where we're going to close our final segment. But I want to give the last word here to Dr. Ross Inarity on this question of where training needs to go, particularly in relation to the question of diversity. How does training need to change to take account not just of the technology, but of the people who are going to be operating that technology?
Yeah, I think we need to look initially at recruitment processes for training in terms of in the classroom and on board ships. So it's twofold, in the classroom and on board ship. How do we, for example, prepare them to assimilate in a very culturally diverse and gender diverse environment? Insofar as females are concerned, we need to look at creating more opportunities, empowering women and creating more opportunities for them to be assimilated in the onboard environment. When I was a cadet many, many years ago, we had a system on board that facilitated growth. So I was able to serve as an officer even before I completed my required period of training. Now, policies, ship owners need to institute policies that facilitate that so that the leadership and management on board also engenders inclusiveness and acceptance in a diverse working environment. So when we talk about diversity, we're talking about inclusion and acceptance, empowering women and creating opportunities for them to grow within the industry and to make a meaningful contribution. The very limited amount of females, we can do a lot more, and we need to be doing a lot more to benefit from the expertise of women on board ships.
And one of the reasons I have this big, broad smile on my face is because when you say gender diversity in the context of a global world, I'm hearing more than just women and people in the Caribbean who are not necessarily, you know what I mean? Yes.
That is true. Diversity covers other aspects, but in the particular context, I narrow it down to saying, for on board, it's always women being on board. Are we recruiting? Some shipping companies do not recruit women at all. But if we now continue to recognize the important role of the seafarer and the value that having, even for social interaction on board, by having female among the crew and the officers, it makes a big difference as to how you execute your duty, remembering that one mistake on board can be catastrophic because it's a very high risk environment that we're working in.
One of the higher risks in the context of COVID-19 is going to be what we're going to be talking about in our final segment. And we do realize that we're running late, but this is a rich discussion. And I want to start with Second Officer Allen here And just first of all, just to raise some of the comments that are in the chat. So it's David Jarrett saying, earlier the point was made about seafarers being abandoned at sea. Wouldn't that make them vulnerable to piracy in open waters? And how prepared are our trained seafarers to resist against such circumstances? I see another question here as well from Darren Wilson saying, seafaring globally continues to suffer from, seafarers globally continue to suffer from mental health issues. From the CMU perspective, how do we have any training programs in place to ensure Jamaica seafarers have a solid state of mind? From the Maritime Administration, do you have any procedures in place to deal with seafarers that suffer from mental issues? A lot of issues there. First, let me ask Second Officer Allen to set the context of what you're experiencing. Then I'll pose part of Mr. Wilson's question to Captain, and then to the other members of Maritime of the Maritime sector overall. Second Officer Allen, what is it that people, who don't understand the sector don't understand about what's happening to seafarers as a consequence of COVID-19?
Let me just say, thank you. Let me just say, once you go on board, the level of work, it doesn't change, regardless of what personal problem you have. So once you go on board, from day one, it's work until the day you sign off. So we work 7 days of the week because the ship is always sailing. It's not landing like a plane and we get to rest. We work right through, right? Personally, one of my main problems that I had mentally, I'm just gonna refer back to it, was when I lost my dad. Spoke to the crew, I was consoled for a bit, but after a few hours, because we're actually leaving port that day, right? And after a few hours, it was back to work. I mean, you don't get time off. How do you deal with that? Each person deal with mourning or loss differently. Luckily, we have access to internet and we can always resort to talking to family and friends, for them to console us. But on board, there's nothing really. The diversity, different nationalities, they deal with things differently. They'll just pat you on the back and it's like, you need to move on. The work continues. So that aspect, I believe, needs to improve. Regards to the next question, in terms of seafarers being abandoned at sea, wouldn't they be vulnerable to piracy? Again, seafarers that have been abandoned they're at sea because they cannot go home, right? The level of work doesn't change. So the mental focus that is required, to execute their job day in, day out, it doesn't change. So it really creates this mental drain on the seafarer, and this can create a lot of accidents. And even in piracy, I think that they will be very vulnerable because, let's be honest, the mind will not be at sea. I can tell you for one that I normally do 4 months contract, right? And after about 3.5 months, it's a matter of countdown. When will I go home? When will I go home? Even though I've been doing this for quite some time. So the level of work and, your mental health, it really decreases each time that you're at sea. Of course, each person, some are stronger than some. But I don't think that there's anything in place, in the maritime industry, or even, see, the question was posed regarding if CMU have any perspective or any training program regards to mental health. I don't think that there's nothing in place to deal with that. And mental health on a whole in Jamaica, I don't think enough focus is placed on that. Let's be honest here, I don't think enough focus is placed on that. And mental health is very, very serious. So can you imagine being away, sailing, and the required level of work 7 days a week that is required?
Let me bring in Captain Newman here. You're training in a completely different context. What can be done, or what are you trying to do to prepare seafarers for what is a completely different environment, especially because of COVID-19? You could go to a ship and you could be stranded for months. We heard where Admiral Brady talking about the fact that up to 200,000 seafarers still stranded at sea.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon. There's not much that we can do, but I wanted to say what we have been trying to do with our new applicants. Of course, we have a psychometric evaluation that they have to complete. They have to do that test before they get in. So that's one. two, we have a robust counseling service in the student services unit that would seek to address if we have a lot of monitoring for the cadets routinely. So if we spot something or detect that someone is maybe affected by some kind of challenges psychologically, mentally, then we can refer, we can arrange for counseling. I wanted to say also at sea, I know that in many ports we have a seafarers service union. There's normally a center that has like a priest or a place that seafarers can go away from the ship to relax. They can go and speak to someone about maybe a problem that they're having. Maybe it's home related or maybe it's on board and so on. But as Alan said, there's no real structure other than that in place. And so the seafarer is very vulnerable when it comes to that in terms of mental illness. And it depends if the individual is an introvert, then they will keep that to themselves. And sometimes it leads to suicide. So it is not spoken about that much, but seafarers do suffer tremendously where that is concerned. In terms of COVID, I think it has been banded about. There's not much that we can do. We observe all the protocols for the cadets if they have to come on the campus and so on. And we have not been having any face-to-face training for cadets anyway as a result of COVID-19. So we're planning to do that in September, hopefully. But of course, we'll have to put the proper arrangements in place for that to be done. And of course, I would have sent out a lot of academic advice to cadets that would include things about COVID-19 and any new developments and so on. So what is happening, what is current now is about the move out of IMO for seafarers to be vaccinated. So that will be new information that needs to be shared with them and so on. So that is what we have been doing.
Archibald?
Could
just add a few points there. I think these are very sound suggestions that are being made by Captain Newman here. It's very important, the initial preparation for seafarers before they go to sea. It's very important that they be properly oriented and to know what to expect, to look at signals, and to communicate as much as possible with fellow seafarers. This is a very important point at sea, and not to be loners, so to speak, because already you're operating in a very isolated environment at sea, days away from any land or any of the normal sort of facilities that you're accustomed to. So that initial training at the Maritime University, at the training institution, is very critical. And part of that training should be by professionals who know how to cope with mental problems. I want to address just briefly the business about cases of abandonment at sea. Nowadays, that's very, very few and far between, abandonment at sea. And when it happens, believe me, it hits the media, the maritime media, instantly. And that creates a lot of interest in order to tackle the problem. And what we have, and I think Captain Newman should remind us of this, we have a lot of very active seafarer associations in ports and at headquarters at places like the International Transport Federation, who get onto these things immediately so that their situation can be ameliorated. One of the greatest things that has happened in sea in the last 10, 15, 20 years is to have the ability to access the internet. Accessing the internet now is a good companion for the seafarer at sea. It can stem a lot of the problems that come up because they are able to maintain communication with the world, with their families and so on. And so it is not a forbidden item anymore at sea. Up to about 10 years ago, ship owners were very wary of getting internet for the seafarers because they don't like people to pass around information, especially if it's negative. But now it's a standard operating procedure for seafarers at sea to use the internet, and the seafarers must use it as a means of continuous communication. But lastly, at sea, communicate with your fellow seafarer. It doesn't matter if they're a different nationality or even a different language. Communicate, because whereas you can pick up signals of irregular behavior in an individual who is working in the same environment as you, they also will be able to pick up anything that's unusual on your part. So that's very important to maintain those communications. Thank you.
Dr. Ross and O'Reilly, I want to close this question of mental health here from the perspective of allied partners. What do partners need to do to promote better mental health among seafarers, especially in the context of COVID-19? That's the closing.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gordon. I think the support, the shoreside support from port authorities, vessels calling at your port, the ability to identify, to go on board and meet with the crew, that you have trained medical personnel who can identify depression, persons suffering from mental health issues, because the health and well-being of the seafarer in itself, if it's negatively impacted, it becomes a risk on board. So the likelihood of accident and incident can occur if we do not take care of our seafarers. So I think from the ports or the allied industry point of view is to provide additional support. And this is where we go back to the whole issue of collaboration, right? And partnership, because the ships are calling at different ports. But you'd want to know as a seafarer, when you arrive at port, there is some support there. I'm feeling depressed. I got a message while on board that I lost my dad. How do I deal with that while still continue to function at a high level? Recognizing that just one mistake can be catastrophic, even while the vessel is in port. So I think we have a responsibility to support the seafarers as much as possible to ensure that they enjoy a reasonable level of health and well-being while they are serving.
And since we're out of time, so I'm just gonna ask everybody. I'm putting you on the spot right now. Well, there's a question here from Jovan Miller. He's asking, why not have an online system that monitors the mental well-being of the seafarer, asking questions every month and creating a profile for each person? So that seems to be a sort of a bit of suggestion in terms of one thing that could possibly work.
If I may jump in, it would require willingness on the part of the seafarer to open up. When persons are experiencing difficulties, they need to be comfortable and also be assured that whatever they share would be done in confidence. And so if you're opening up, I'm not sure what the level of response would be and how accurate information would be shared. So confidentiality, and the sensitive nature of it would play a factor in that scenario.
All right, so we've talked a lot about partnership and collaboration. I'm going to put everybody on the spot and say that we've talked about seafarers in particular. We have talked about challenges facing seafarers, what needs to be done on that front in the context of partnership and collaboration, health and wellness, and funding. If there's one thing that you would like each member of the audience, and perhaps Jamaicans overall, because we will be posting this on our platforms and asking our partners in the Maritime Authority of Jamaica, the Shipping Association of Jamaica, and the Port Authority of Jamaica as well, to share this, this important forum and some of the points from it. So if there's one point that you would like someone who is watching this video a little later on to leave understanding, what is that point? I'm going to start the other way and end with Second Officer Ali. I'm going to start with Director General of the Maritime Authority of Jamaica, Admiral Brady.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I think this has been a very, very useful session. And for many, many seafarers, particularly, who are looking on to see that, look, we the people ashore on the support side are very, very interested in your well-being, in your health, and in your progress as seafarers. And it was a great pleasure in sharing the thoughts among ourselves. And we hope that some of the things which are coming out of this can actually come to fruition. But if I could leave with anything, I'd like to say that in spite of the negatives that we have all discussed today, the seafaring profession is an extremely rewarding one. And although COVID has brought out a lot of its inadequacies and its deficiencies, which we must now fix and fix together consistent with the theme of this particular panel discussion. We must try to fix them and attend to them and not brush them aside and wait until next year, June 25, to recall and recommit. We need to start doing something about it. And it means that we have to now set ourselves a schedule for maybe in about a month or two time to have a little debrief of this particular panel discussion, see where we can do anything to bring to the attention of the people who make a difference, who can make the laws, who can develop the policies to address these concerns. But it's a great profession. And I think it's very rewarding, very noble. And I would encourage my son to become a seafarer too. Thank you.
Captain Newman.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon. My position, well said, Admiral. I would like to see, my takeaway from this is, I think I want to see solid 2 or 3 partnerships that will be able to allow our youngsters to be able to enroll in the 2 training programs that we have. And based on what Admiral has said, it is a very rewarding career. It can be very impactful on your life and your families, and you get to see the world for free. And I think that is what I would really like to see. 2 or 3 solid partnerships that support collaboration, whatever it is that you want to call it. So maybe from 2 shipping companies, the very same Exmar, they have a good testimony about our Jamaican officers. They're very satisfied. And if they were not good, then they would not be running after them like that. The programs are intact. We are fully compliant with the standards established by IMO through the STC, so there are no worries there. We are struggling because we'd like to upgrade our simulators and so on. So the partnership that we're looking for would help us in that area. But I want to see our youngsters being able to take advantage of the opportunity without the burden of worrying about how to pay the tuition, how to pay for the boarding, or whatever it is, so that they can focus on their studies and be successful. That's my
and probably part of that is the issue you raised when you start, that there's a role, especially in the context of what you just said and what Admiral Brady just said, that a lot of people who benefited from it also need to not just speak about it, but also need to be thinking of ways in which they can provide support itself. It could be a scholarship, it could be a bursary, right. You know, not just sharing the stories, but also having active support. I'm going to give the last word to Second Officer Allen. So I want to hear now from Dr. Ross in RRT.
Okay, thank you very much. The important thing for me is for industry practitioners to recognize our greater awareness of the importance of the link between the seafarer, the ship, the cargo, and the port, and how the contribution of seafarers impact our daily lives. That greater awareness, I think, will trigger greater support as well.
Thank you, Dr. Rossonarity. And the last comment is to Second Officer Allen.
Thank you. So my takeaway from this is maritime conscience. Maritime conscience in the sense where we are all aware that seafarers exist. Not just, okay, their ship and ship is sailing, but the importance of our seafarers. Everybody on the panel, we share a common goal, speaking on how important we are for industry, for society, and for the world at large. And also from Captain, I like the fact that CMU and you as the Dean realize that we are behind when it comes to the advancement of technology, because I myself, I learn a lot when I'm at sea compared to what I learn at CMU, because ships on a whole, they're advancing robotics and technology. So my takeaway is basically I can take comfort in the fact that future seafarers, students that will pass through CMU, they will benefit from whenever the collaboration is made, and we have improve simulators and all, that I can take comfort in the fact that they will be trained and will be able to execute the high level of work that is required from us.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. So thank you, Mr. Allen. So I had said that there's the last comment. It's actually going to be the last comment. It's going to come from the people in the chat. Darren Wilson just saying here, thanking us for putting on this session. He says he is appreciative of the timing, that he's a student of the World Maritime University, and he's currently conducting research on the upscaling of Jamaica's seafarer supply using the Philippines and India as models. And this session really shows, he says, that Jamaica is active in maritime affairs and cares about our seafarers. And I want to echo the comment here that I'm going to read from my colleague Karen Mullings at the Maritime Authority of Jamaica, who says that, Garfield, it was impactful to hear your perspective as an active seafarer facing difficulties during this pandemic. I want to thank you, Second Officer Garfield Allen. I want to thank Dr. Ross Inararity, Breaking Barriers there at the Port Authority of Jamaica, and straddling so many different sectors and sharing our experience, both at the Port Authority of Jamaica and the Caribbean Maritime Authority. I want to thank Captain Devon Newman, who is Dean of the Faculty of Marine and Nautical Studies at the Caribbean Maritime University. And I want to thank as well Rear Admiral Peter Brady, who is Director General of the Maritime Authority of Jamaica. All of you for sharing your comments with us this morning. All of you who turned out for the chat, who turned out and shared your comments, who turned out and who are sharing overall. Remember that this is part of an effort that not just the Caribbean Maritime University, but the Maritime Authority of Jamaica, the Port Authority of Jamaica, and the Shipping Association of Jamaica have been working at for well over a month, just to try to get people to remember how important seafarers are, especially in the context of International Day of the Seafarers. And that if you check out any of those pages, the Maritime Authority of Jamaica, of Jamaica's page, the Shipping Association of Jamaica's page, or the Caribbean Maritime University's page, you will see content about International Day of the Seafarers and international and overall the role and importance of seafarers. Share those comments, continue the discussion online, and let's continue to underscore the importance of seafarers in the global industry. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us this morning, and have a wonderful morning and a wonderful weekend.